The country will have to wait until a parliamentary committee meets to get the Health Ministry's fulsome response to a damning Auditor General report. It shows that $417 million was paid out without formal contracts to deal with issues linked to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton is, however, making it clear there was no misappropriation. Andrea Chisholm has our report.
The audit shows there was no basic paper trail to account for emergency spending related to the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, 6 hotels and guest houses were paid $293 million to offer quarantine services without formal contracts. That exposed the Health Ministry to unbudgeted liability claims and different payment arrangements. One facility even asked the ministry to pay its electricity bill and 90% of water charges. The ministry told the Auditor General that it did not have enough time to negotiate formal contracts with hotels and guest houses to quarantine people entering Jamaica. The report also stated that the ministry was proactive in activating emergency protocols. Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton reacted.
COVID was a difficult period, very, very difficult period. There are many decisions that were taken on the spur of the moment because lives were on the line. And in the case of the hotels and the accommodation, if you recall the context of persons on ships waiting to be taken off and so on. So there are a lot of issues. Now, this is not to excuse away what the report says and learning from those experiences and making things better.
The Auditor General's report states that between January and June 2020, $124 million was paid to 8 suppliers for infrastructural works. Again, there were no contracts. In response, the ministry said it usually has formal contracts for infrastructural works. Plus, the contractors' letters of quotation and the ministry's acceptance form a binding contract. The report also pointed out that the Health Ministry did not tell the National Contracts Commission why those suppliers were directly contracted.
I saw some headline in one media that is suggesting that funds disappeared without a trace, giving an impression that somehow somebody pocketed this money and went off with it. And that is certainly not the case, and that's not my interpretation of what the report says. My interpretation of the report is that the Auditor General has not claimed any inappropriate or misappropriation, I should say, of funds. And that's very important to note because, there is always a room for speculation and so on. What the Auditor General spoke to, as I understand it in the report, is the issue of whether or not a process was followed where contracts in the tangible way, how contracts are written, were written.
The audit was conducted between May 2020 and June 2022 following the $8 billion allocation to the Health Ministry so it could respond to COVID-19. $1.1 billion was also allocated to the Labour Ministry.
The process formally works that where the report now is taken to PAC, chaired by Opposition Member Julian Robinson, and where the Chief Accounting Officer, the Permanent Secretary, Dunstan Brand, will have an opportunity with his team to respond to the report. And I think that's the appropriate place to deal with some of the concerns that have been raised in the Auditor General report.
Andrea Chisholm, TVJ News.